All right, gentlemen, like I said in class, I'm really excited about this one because we're talking about something that on paper looks really complex and looks really hard. But once you actually work through it, you'll see that it's actually pretty simple and involves some pretty basic rules. So if you're bashing away at your homework and mum and dad are looking at your shoulder, they might be asking you like, whoa, what are you working on there? Then you can just carefully tell them, don't worry, I'm just working out what 10 times 4 to the power of 3 is and multiplying that by 7 times 10 to the power of 2. You'll sound like a genius. So, by way of definition, a power is simply a way of showing that a number has been multiplied by itself a number of times. And if that sounds complicated, don't overthink it because we've already done work involving powers. We did it when we looked at square numbers. So for instance, if we did 10 squared, which would be 10 to the power of 2, that little 2 is telling us that it's going to the power of 2, which means that 10 is being multiplied by itself 2 times. 10 to the power of 2 is simply 10 times 10. 10 to the power of 3 would be 10 times 10 times 10. Now, in our work that we're looking at, we're only going as far as 10 to the power of 4, which, as you can see by the pattern above, all that it means is 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Miss Lee told me a really awesome trick. Whatever the number is, whatever the power is, if we're multiplying by 10, that indicates the number of zeros that you put after your 1. So for instance, 10 to the power of 2 is 10 times 10, which is 1 and then 2 zeros, so 100. 10 to the power of 3 would be 10 times 10 times 10, so that would be a 1 followed by 1, 2, 3 zeros. 1, 2, 3. 10 to the power of 4 would be a 1 followed by 4 zeros. So 10 to the power of 4 would be 10,000. If you can understand everything that's on the screen right now, that's really all you need in order to succeed this lesson. 10 to the power of 2, 10 to the power of 3, and 10 to the power of 4. We also look at 10 to the power of 1, which all that it means is 10 has been multiplied by 1, so 10 to the power of 1 is simply 10. You'll see that pop up a few times throughout the work that you're doing. It's kind of a way of confusing you, but it's pretty simple. Alright, the next thing we're going to be looking at is something called expanded notation. A really complex way of saying, let's take a simple number and write it out in the world's most confusing way. So when you look at this, an equation like this or a number sentence like this on your page, don't freak out because it's pretty simple, especially because we know the rule for how to calculate powers. So let's break it down. The first thing it says is 6 times 10 to the power of 4. We know that 10 to the power of 4 is 10,000. And we know that if we're doing 6 times 10,000, it's really simple. We know how many zeros to include after the 6. So 6 times 10 to the power of 4 would be 60,000. 4 times 10 to the power of 3. We know 10 to the power of 3 is 1,000. So we know 4 times 1,000 is going to be 4,000. 7 times 10 to the power of 2. We know 10 to the power of 2 would be 10 times 10 or 100. 7 times 100 is going to be 700. 2 times 10 to the power of 1 is going to be basically just 2 times 10, which is 20. And then at the end it says, and plus 1. So we know 1 is just 1. And so if we write this out as a second number sentence, we've got 60,000 plus 4,000 plus 700 plus 20 plus 1. That's really easy for us to put together, being really careful with place value. We've got 64,721. So that whole process that we just did is called expanded notation. You need to know how to expanded notation. There we go. I've spelled expanded wrong. Expanded. Get rid of that N. Expanded notation. You need to know how to do it both ways. So you need to know how to read a number sentence like this and then expand it into a number like this one. And then you need to know how to turn a number that's split up this way back into a number sentence that looks like that. The only thing you need to be careful of is that you're getting your 10 to the powers of correct. Make sure it's in the right place value, whether that's 10,000s or 1,000s. And you also need to make sure that when you do write it out, you're separating your place values. You can see I've used commas here. You don't need to do that. You can normally just leave a gap. I've just done commas because my numbers are a bit small and I didn't want it to be too confusing. So if you know how to do that, plus the rules that we went through before, you've got all the tools that you need to be successful with your powers of 10. I told you, it looks really hard, but it's actually pretty simple once you break it down. If you're writing down those number sentences home, doing a bit of revision early, I guarantee you, you will look like a maths genius to mum and dad.